Then the other set of considerations that lead me away from materialism have to do with the nature of conscious subjects. So I had the thought, because you have this vagueness argument, I had the thought that maybe this might be a line of reasoning that would appeal to you. So I guess your thought is that whatever the alleged property that we want to physical property that we want to identify with consciousness is, there will be vague or borderline cases of that, cases where either you have to say that, this is determinately instantiated, but it seems really arbitrary to say that, or else you have to say it's vague or indeterminate or just a matter of convention, and consciousness isn't like that. It can't be vague or indeterminate or a matter of convention, whether you're conscious. And so, do I hear Leibniz's music coming in, right? So they can't be the same thing, right? There are a couple of sort of vagueness type arguments for various forms of substance dualism. So Peter Unger, who has no religious motivation or anything, he lays out this argument called the experiential problem of the many. So his thought is that physical objects have like fuzzy boundaries, at the microphysical level. There's not any principled reason if you take some random electron that's about to fly off or something, that's on the very, very edge. Not any principled reason to say that is or isn't part of the cup. So you wind up with vastly many sets of particles that are equally good candidates for being the cup. And so if we say that any of them composes a cup, really we should say that all of them compose a cup. And so there are billions and billions of overlapping cups right here. And just ordinarily that just doesn't matter. He and I both think actually the better thing to do is to say that composition doesn't really occur. There aren't really such things as cups. But if you think it does occur, you should think it occurs for all of them. But then if we say that about whatever physical object I'm supposed to be, we again wind up with this view in which there are countless numbers of different experiencers present here. But a different, and this is the one that I thought maybe was more directly relevant to your sort of argument. A different way, and I thought of this, I was reading Michael Huemer's new book, Knowledge, Reality, and Value. And he also he is a substance dualist, but he is also somebody with no religious motivation for it or anything. But you might think when we consider sort of Ship of Theseus type puzzles, you're going to wind up with what almost look like borderline cases of identity, right? When you switch out all of the pieces of Theseus' ship over the course of a year, is it the same ship at the end? Or suppose every time we switch it out, we also like change the configuration a little bit. And at the end of the year, there's a house. We've transformed the ship into a house. Well, is there some particular, like this was the board we changed where the ship stopped existing and the house began existing? Or were there like transitional forms? There were other objects like ship houses in the middle, or, that seems implausible to me. To think that there's some like deep fact about the world, mind-independent fact about the world that's like the determinate point at which the switch occurs. And so again, I think the moral winds up being there just aren't such things as ships. There are just collections of particles that are arranged shipwise. I'm a mereological nihilist. If you think that, then if you think that I exist, then I can't be any complex physical object. And so either I'm some simple physical object or I'm an immaterial object, right? But if you don't go the nihilist route, you might want to say that, well, it winds up being kind of vague or indeterminate or a matter of convention, whether we say that this is the ship in the middle of this process or not, the same object in the middle of this process or not. But of course, then you can run the same sort of argument with my brain or my body or whatever physical object you might think I am. You start replacing parts of it with computer chips parts or, stuff you cut out of somebody else's brain or whatever. At the end of this process, is that the same object? You might think, well, that's kind of going to be a matter of, it will be vague or indeterminate or a matter of convention. But I'm inclined to think it can't be vague or indeterminate or a matter of convention whether I exist and whether, a certain set of experiences is being had by me or by somebody else. And so the thought is, if there are composite objects, there might not be deep determinate facts about whether, my brain or my body survives a certain process. But there will always be deep determinate facts about whether I survive and I'm having conscious experiences at the end of it. So you have a similar sort of Leibnizian. So for instance, I was in class with Peter Van Inwagen years ago when I was in graduate school. He's an animalist, so he thinks that I'm an organism. I'm this whole human organism. But the essential part of me is the brainstem, because that's the thing that regulates my vital functions. So he thinks if you replaced my brainstem with a mechanical replacement, then I would cease to exist. And I asked him, well, what if we did, consider like a series, you replace one cell with like a functionally isomorphic mechanical cell, or 2 cells, or 3 cells. When would I stop existing? And he said, it's indeterminate. And I said, what is it like for me when it's indeterminate whether I exist? And he said, it's indeterminate. And so you have indeterminacy of consciousness again, right? Yeah. And I said, that can't be true. That doesn't make any sense. And he said, well, all philosophical views have costs. And then we started talking about something else. Some people will say I'm not a brain or a body. I am, my persistence conditions are psychological. And so what matters at the end of this series is not whether the brain or the body survived, but whether there's the right kind of psychological continuity. Then you run into some other problems. I mean, there may also be edge cases with psychological continuity. What counts as a sufficient degree of psychological continuity for me to survive or not survive. You also run into questions about, well, wait a minute, if I'm not my brain or my body, and you're a materialist, I'm not my soul. Well, what am I? Mm-hmm. Some people say I'm not anything. I'm a Humean bundle, right? Yeah. Just a collection. That doesn't seem right to me. Some people say that I'm a mind which is constituted by, but not identical to, my body or my brain. So I'm a material object, and I exactly overlap my brain, and I'm made out of all the same parts. But I'm not my brain. I'm different because I have different modal properties from my brain. That doesn't seem. That runs into other problems, I think. But psychological theories, at least sort of ordinary ones, also run into intrinsicality worries when it comes to identity, because, and this is true on some bodily theories too, but more obviously on psychological theories, you can wind up with cases where there are 2 equally good candidates for being me, and either of them on its own would be me, but they can't both be me. So what do we say about this? So some people think, for instance, that, if you scanned my brain in a way that destroyed it, but then you uploaded it to a computer, you uploaded the scan to a computer and emulated my brain, then I would survive that, because the emulated person would be psychologically continuous with me in the right way, right? People get teleporter cases. I step into a teleporter on Earth and my body is destroyed, but a new body is made for me out of new matter on Mars, and this person is psychologically continuous with me. They think I would survive that. But you can imagine the teleporter malfunctions and it sends one beam to Mars, but it also sends another beam to Venus. And now there are 2 psychologically continuous people who come out. I can't be both of them, so which one am I? And typically people say, well, okay, so we need a closest continuer condition or a non-branching condition. So in this case, when there are 2 equally good candidates, I'm not either one of them. But that's very weird, because just like it's weird for consciousness to be intrinsic, it's weird for personal identity to be weird for consciousness to be extrinsic. It's weird for personal identity to be extrinsic in this way. So it seems to me, I mean, the person on Mars would have been me, except that without changing anything about the person on Mars, this other thing happened on Venus, right? There was this other guy. But how can whether the other guy is on Venus affect whether this person, who intrinsically has everything that it takes to count as me, is me or not? So you might. Anyway, maybe that was a bit rambly, but my thought is you run into the same sorts of arbitrariness or vagueness or whatever. It doesn't seem like there's a deep determinate fact about whether ordinary objects survive certain sorts of transformations. But it seems like there must be a deep determinate fact about whether I survive those transformations. So I must not be an ordinary object. Maybe I'm some sort of not very ordinary object with psychological persistence conditions, but it's not clear that that helps so much, and that might cause other problems too. So that's sort of the structure of the argument.
Yeah, like I was never that interested in composition until I realized its relevance to consciousness. Like, if you are some kind of Mariological nihilist, which seems to be kind of the default position for a lot of materialists, then phenomenal unity and like certain aspects of identity do become much harder to explain. But with identity, okay, so it sounds like the disadvantages of materialism and the advantages of dualism, as far as you're concerned, have to do with consciousness and identity. And I'm going to link a couple of videos where you talk about identity in more detail, because I don't have super strong intuitions about identity like that. I have a couple here and there. Like, I think that an essential part of me is my subjective point of view. But beyond that, I don't really know what I know that I would not get into the Star Trek transporter because it's a murder machine. And like, even if there is some kind of psychological continuity, like my point of view would come to an end and a different point of view would come to be, and they would have all my memories and stuff, and they wouldn't be able to tell that they weren't me, but I think they wouldn't be me in some sense.
I think I'm fine with all that. I mean, do you agree that there will always be some kind of determinate objective fact about whether your point of view is still around or your point of view?
Yeah. Like, those vagueness arguments are interesting to me, but I feel like a lot of their import is carried over from my existing feelings about like the vagueness of phenomenal consciousness, or rather the precision of phenomenal consciousness. So yeah, like my vagueness arguments just have to do with experience, where it's like, reductive materialists think that experience emerged weakly in the same way that like liquid emerged or a chair emerged. So, weak emergence is usually vague, especially up here, in kind of the macrobiological realm where consciousness is supposed to have emerged. But the emergence of consciousness couldn't have been vague because it has this property of precision. So if all weak emergence is vague, and if the emergence of experience couldn't have been vague, then it wasn't the product of weak emergence. So reductive materialism is out. And the other vagueness argument that I like to make is just that it's just an arbitrariness consideration. Like, any point you pick where phenomenal consciousness is supposed to spring into existence is going to feel totally arbitrary. Like, it could, like, okay, where, like 25,017 neurons, like, why not 25,018? Like, it just seems like any point you pick is going to be arbitrary, because again, this is not like a heap of sand or something. Like, this is different from all those from all the other examples. Like, with a chair, you could continually deform a chair until it wasn't really clear whether it was a chair or not, and that's fine, I think. But it's not fine with phenomenal consciousness, because it's either like something to be or it's not, and there's no borderline case of phenomenal consciousness. So I think that's a huge issue for reductive materialists. If it's not an argument that just shows that it's false, it's a huge anomaly, at least, because it's not like, the emergence of experience couldn't have been like other cases of weak emergence.
Yeah, that all seems right to me. Yeah, my thought is that applying the same sorts of thoughts to this question about whether your point of view survives might motivate.
Right.
Yeah. Some sort of
Yeah, I don't know what I think about the subject of experience. Like, that's something I need to think more about, because I'm not sure what if you're able to collapse those things, the experiences and the subjects. Like, again, I don't really have strong views about this, but like, that's the move that Galen Strawson makes. Like, he thinks there's just like, these things are just identical, like the subject and the experience and stuff. And yeah, it leads to weird things about the self, but